All right, ready to make entry? Check. Fuck! All right, troops, settle down, settle down. Check your mouths, find your seats. Go ahead and get started with this. Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. This is going to mark the first episode in my series, Intro to the AR-15. Basically, this is going to be a series breaking down all the different kind of bits, pieces, and components of the AR-15 platform and how it affects your decision on which one will work best for you. So going into what different barrel lengths mean, different triggers, different safeties, lower receivers, upper receivers, so on and so forth. We're going to start off though with barrels because at the end of the day, the barrel is basically the heart and soul of your firearm. The length of your barrel and also going into even deeper, the material that your barrel is made out of can drastically affect your firearm's purpose. Now, this isn't going to be a video talking about like, oh, this is the best barrel length, this is the worst barrel length. This video is basically here to give you the information on different barrel lengths, the pros, the cons, the do's, the don'ts. So that way, when you are going and selecting your firearm or selecting the parts that you want to use to build your firearm, you have a little bit more ammunition to go into that fight with. So that way, you're getting the firearm that fits your needs the best. Also, real quick, like I did say, this is going to be a series mainly focused on the AR-15 platform. However, there are going to be details and specs that are going to be universal between any type of 5.56 rifle. Specifically, when we're talking about barrel length on this one, there's going to be some things like velocity and all that kind of stuff that is universal between just 5.56 rifles in general. As always, all firearms in this video have been provided graciously by Harmsys Home Security Solutions. Harmsys Home Security Solutions, because physical wounds heal. There's a fucking spider on my wall. Eat it. All right, so starting off, we're gonna go with the most common barrel length in the United States, which is the 16-inch barrel. Now, I'm gonna start off with kind of a note about 16-inch barrels. They can be either mid-length gas systems like this one, or they can be carbine length gas systems. The fact that it can be a mid-length gas system is a pro. You want mid-length gas systems, and I'll talk more about this in depth when I make a video specifically about gas systems, but suffice to say, mid-length gas systems, they have less felt recoil, and they're a lot more gentle on your bolt carrier group, specifically your bolt. And we'll be talking a little bit more about that when we talk about the 10.5s and the 11.5s. Now, kind of going through some of the pros of a 16-inch barrel. First of all, it is basically the shortest barrel that you can legally have on a rifle without needing to pin and weld your muzzle device. We'll talk a little bit more in depth about what pinning and welding means when we start talking about the 13.7s and the 14.5s down the line. But suffice to say, it is basically as short as you can go without either needing to classify your firearm as a pistol, as a SBR, or have to get a muzzle device pin and welded permanently. The 16-inch barrel also provides good velocity from American Defense Manufacturing. A 16-inch barrel with Hornady M193 55 grain 5.56 will get an average muzzle velocity of 3,027 feet per second, which is good. 5.56 is a very velocity-dependent cartridge, so having a higher velocity is a good thing. It also retains that velocity out to further ranges better than its shorter barrel counterparts. 16-inch barrels are also very easily found. So finding a 16-inch upper or a 16-inch replacement barrel is going to be super easy. Now, what are 16-inch barrels good for? 16-inch barrels are good for general purpose carbines and recce rifle. They're still short and handy enough to deal with close quarters fairly well. They are a little bit heavier when compared to their shorter barrel counterparts, but they're not insanely heavy. Once we get into the longer barrels, we'll kind of talk more about weight. Now getting into the cons of a 16-inch barrel, because there are a few. Though they are short and handy enough to deal with close quarters well, they are not the optimal choice for that. As you can see here, kind of dealing with the doorway, for the most part, a 16-inch barrel is not much of an issue until I get to this point and I have to clear that corner. Because right now, as you can see, my muzzle is not too far off of the door jamb. So in order to clear that corner, what I'm going to have to do is I'm going to have to short stock my rifle, basically bring it up over my shoulder, step into the room, and then punch back out with my muzzle. And that can be a little bit cumbersome. If I just try to step into the room while still kind of having the rifle on my shoulder, I get hung up on the door jamb. I'm not getting my safety deposit back. So like I was saying, 16-inch barrels, doable, but not optimal for close quarter situation. Another con of the 16-inch barrel, and we'll talk a little bit more about this when we get into 13.7s and 14.5s, the velocity that you get out of a 16-inch barrel is almost exactly like a 14.5-inch barrel, and you're cutting off about 1.5 inches, which doesn't sound like much. But when it comes to clearing rooms and other things, every inch matters. All right, so now talking about 10.5-inch barrels, we're also going to kind of talk about 10.3s at the same time. This right here, this is actually an 11.5-inch barrel. We'll get into that after we're done talking about the 10.5s and the 10.3s, but I just wanted something to hold. So talking about 10.5 and 10.3 barrels, basically, what are they good for? Well, they are good for home defense pistols or short-barreled rifles. They are absolutely awesome in close quarters combat. I've been a fan of the Mark 18 for a while. It does have its downsides, and we'll get into the downsides of a 10.5-inch or a 10.3-inch barrel in a second. But suffice to say, the 10.3s and the 10.5s make awesome home defense guns, and they also make really good truck guns as well. Basically, anytime that a short, lightweight, handy pistol or short-barreled rifle is preferable, they make a great option. So getting into the pros of a 10.3 or a 10.5-inch barrel, as I said before, they are nice and short and handy in a close quarters engagement. They are lightweight, and 10.3 and 10.5 barrels, specifically 10.5 barrels and 10.5 barreled uppers, are very easy to find. It's a pretty proliferate platform because of the popularity of the Mark 18, which is basically a shortened version of an M4 used by typically, I know, Navy SEALs, Coast Guard, MSRT, and TACLET use it. MARSOC has used it. A bunch of different SF dudes, super operator cool guys, they use Mark 18s. Now getting into the cons of a 10.5 or 10.3-inch barrel. First and foremost is the poor muzzle velocity and how it very poorly retains its velocity due to the shorter barrel and not having enough time to achieve full powder burn and get that slug up to a good velocity. Again, using American Defense Manufacturing's averages here, a 10.5-inch barrel will average about 2,691 feet per second using, again, standard M193 ball ammo. Another downside to it that we kind of talked about with the 16-inch barrel is the carbine length gas system. With a 10.5-inch barrel, you're going to be stuck with a carbine length gas system. You don't have enough barrel length to go up to a mid-length gas system. Now what that means is you're going to have more felt recoil, and you're going to be a lot rougher on your bolt, specifically your locking lugs and your extractor. I worked with Mark 18s enough to know that one of the main things that you're constantly replacing on them are your bolts and your extractors, because you're either shearing off locking lugs or you're breaking extractors. And then the final downside to a 10.5 or 10.3-inch barrel is that it has to be either a pistol, meaning that it has to have a pistol stabilizing brace on it, or it has to be a registered SBR, because, well, we got dipshits that know nothing about firearms making laws about firearms. All right, now moving on to the 11.5-inch barrel. A lot of what I'm going to say is going to basically be a repeat of the 10.5 and the 10.3-inch barrels, but there's going to be some extra there. So starting off again, what is it good for? Again, home defense gun, truck gun, something where something light and handy and short is what you want. Getting into the pros, just like the Mark 18, 10.3-inch, 10.5-inch barrels, it is going to be short and handy in close quarters. You're going to notice that extra inch of barrel, but not so much to where it's a detriment to you in most close quarter situations. Now, to compare this to the 16-inch barrel, again, I'm going to come around this corner, little by little, little by little, clearing it out. And just like before, I'm back to having to clear this corner in particular. I see I have a lot more space between my muzzle and the door jamb. I still am going to have to short stock, but not nearly as much. And when I make entry into this room, it's going to be very fast, and I can just attack that corner. To kind of demonstrate that a little bit better, kind of doing that at speed. All right, now getting into the cons of an 11.5 barrel, and they're basically the same as the 10.3s and the 10.5 barrels, aside from the fact that while 11.5 is becoming more popular, 10.3 and 10.5 are still more popular. It's going to be easier for you to find 10.5 and 10.3 barreled uppers and barrels than it is necessarily going to be to find 11.5 barreled uppers and just barrels on their own. Also, I know I talked about how it does have better velocity than a 10.5 or a 10.3. That still doesn't mean that necessarily has good velocity. It is good velocity for close quarters fighting, and it helps kind of extend your engagement range out, but it's still not good when compared to 13.7s, 14.5s, 16 inches, so on and so forth. Just like with the 10.3s and the 10.5s, you're going to still be stuck with a carbine length gas system, which means that you're going to have that more felt recoil, and it's still going to be rough on your bolt and your extractor. Not as rough as a 10.3 or a 10.5 because that's a longer dwell period, but it's still going to be pretty rough on them. And just like with the 10.3s and the 10.5s, because we live in a dystopia that is ran by idiots, we have to have it either be a pistol or an SBR, in which case we basically have to just bribe the government to give us our rights back. All right, so now we're going to talk about 12.5 barrels. I'm going to kind of gloss over this one because I really don't like 12.5 barrels. There's not really too much to say on them. I don't have a 12.5 barrel. Again, this one is 11.5. But 12.5 barrels, what are they good for? Honestly, the main thing that I see people running 12.5 barrels for at this point in time is XM177 clones, where they have a pin welded flash suppressor on them. So that way they don't have to use like a AR15 pistol brace like this on them. They can, because it'll be considered a rifle, because once pin and welded, it adds to the overall barrel length. They can have an actual CAR 15 stock on it. So typically the only time I really see them is from cloners at this point. They used to be popular, but they've kind of gone out of favor, and more people are again going to the 11.5s. So starting off, as always, with the pros, what does a 12.5 barrel have going for it? The only real pros I can kind of think of when it comes to a 12.5 barrel is that it can allow you to have a longer rail on your firearm, which could be more comfortable for people who have longer arms. Gives you a little bit more space on your rail to mount your accessories. That is one downside to having shorter handguards, like on here, is that you end up having much less space on that rail to fit everything. So when you start adding things like foregrips, unless it's a pistol, weapon lights, IR illuminators, IR laser aiming devices, you start to run out of rail space real quick. All right, now talking about the cons of the 12.5, and I might rustle some jimmies on this one, but there's a reason why I call the 12.5 the 40 cal of the AR world, because compared to an 11.5, you're not getting really any measurable like FPS gain. Like, yeah, you're going to get some, but it's really not anything that you're going to notice. And you're also not really getting much FPS retention downrange. So a 12.5 barrel, again, same ammunition, 55 grain, 193 ball, is going to have an average muzzle velocity of 2,856 as compared to the 11.5's 2,809. So you're getting a little less than 50 feet per second by adding an extra inch to your muzzle. Yes, muzzle velocity does not scale evenly. It's not like you add an inch to your muzzle and you automatically gain an extra 100 feet per second because science. As I stated before, 12.5 is kind of going the way of the dodo. There are still people running it. There are still manufacturers out there making 12.5 barrels, but they are becoming less common and harder to find just due to the fact that they're kind of falling out of favor. All right, so now getting into what are two of my personal favorite barrel lengths, the 14.5 and the 13.7. Now, what are these good for? Well, these are kind of, again, like your 16-inch. These are your general purpose carbine and recce rifles. These are something that can handle close quarters effectively, though they may not be specifically designed for them, but they can also reach out and stack bodies at range as well. These are kind of your, if I could only have one rifle, what should I have? Something like a 14.5 or a 13.7 is a great option for that. Getting into the pros, just like the 16-inch barrel, these can be mid-length. This is a mid-length 14.5-inch barrel right here. And again, just like I said with the 16-inch, what that means is you have a lighter recoil impulse and it will extend the life of your bolt and your extractor. So you don't have to replace them nearly as often as with a carbine length, especially a carbine length short barrel like a 10.3 or 10.5 like we were talking about before. Just like with the 16-inch barrel, you're also getting really good velocity. Like I mentioned during the 16-inch barrel segment, your velocity from a 14.5 is going to be pretty similar to that of a 16-inch. So 14.5, same ammunition, 55 grain, 193 ball, is going to give you about 3,019 feet per second. Whereas your 16-inch is going to give you 3,027 feet per second. So really no sizable increase in velocity between the two, and you get a shorter, lighter package out of a 14.5. Now, 13.7, you do lose some velocity when compared to that. With a 13.7 using the same ammunition, you're going to get about 2,952 feet per second, which means that you are losing about 60 feet per second by chopping off that almost inch of barrel between a 14.5 and a 13.7. Now, what's kind of the point of a 14.5 or a 13.7? Well, the point is it gives you the ability to have the shortest barrel while still being able to consider this rifle through the process of pinning and welding your muzzle device. Not going to be able to really kind of see it, but the muzzle device on both of these firearms, my BCM and my PSA Jackal over there, I know it's not an AR, but I won't tell anyone if you don't. Both muzzle devices are pin and welded, meaning that they are permanently affixed to the muzzle of the weapon, meaning that they are counted towards the overall barrel length. So, legally speaking, these are 16-inch barrel rifles, meaning that they are actual rifles and not short-barreled rifles and not pistols. Now, we'll get into the downsides of pinning and welding when we're talking about the cons. So again, kind of taking this opportunity to demonstrate what it's like to kind of go through a doorway with a 14.5 as opposed to the 11.5 that I showed before and the 16-inch before that. I'm going to go ahead and clear this doorway. So starting off just like always, kind of biting off each little piece of the pie, using that door jamb as concealment because there's no cover in close quarters. Just like before, I get to here, and now I have to clear that corner. As you see, I, again, have a little bit more room off my muzzle compared to a 16-inch, but it's still not that much. Just like before, I'm going to have to short stock, bring that rifle over my shoulder, step in, and clear that corner. So just like with the 16-inch, doable, but not as intuitive as with the 11.5 or shorter. So pinning and welding, like I said, that means that you are permanently affixing that muzzle device to that barrel. Now, what does that mean for you as the end user? Well, that basically means that once you pick your muzzle device, you're not changing it. I do know people that have been able to remove the pin and weld on a muzzle device and save the barrel, but I also know of a lot more people that say that they can do that and then absolutely botch it and ruin your threads, and now you gotta get a whole new barrel anyways. So basically, when you're getting a 14.5 or a 13.7, you're doing a pin and weld on it, you're basically picking your fate with that muzzle device right off the rip. Now, if you already know what muzzle device you want, like say you want something like I have on my Jackal over here, where it is a chemo suppressor mount, hey, more power to you. I mean, if you do not plan to change that muzzle device, hell yeah, go ahead, pin and weld it, so that way you don't have to worry about it anymore. But that's kind of one thing about my BCM that I'm not the biggest fan of. I was a broke, E4 at the time. Yeah, broke E4 at the time, and I couldn't afford the extra couple $100 to have a good muzzle device pin and welded to my upper when I was placing my order with BCM. So I just went with their extended A2 bird cage. Not a bad option, but it does limit the capabilities of the rifle because it means that for the most part, I don't really have a good way of mounting a suppressor to it. All right, and now we're getting into the biggins. So we're going to be talking about 18-inch barrels. This right here, it's a Mark 12 Mod Zero. I've done a little bit of work to it, but this is a 18-inch stainless steel barrel. So, just like before, what is this barrel length good for? Well, it's very good for precision rifles and SPRs. Now talking about the pros of an 18-inch barrel, you get very good velocity and very good velocity retention. That's why it makes a very good precision rifle or SPR, SPR standing for special purpose rifle. Sorry, I didn't say that before. But you get excellent velocity out of the 18-inch barrel. That's why it was adopted for things like the Mark 12. Again, talking about same ammunition, 55 grain M193 ball, you're going to be looking at about 3,150 feet per second from the muzzle out of an 18-inch barrel. And then comparing that to kind of the next step down, which is typically a 16-inch barrel at 3,027 feet per second, you're gaining 125 FPS by adding a couple inches to your barrel. And that matters, especially when we start pushing out to range, which is exactly what things like this are designed for. Can you use it in close quarters? You can use this in close quarters in the same way that American cheese is cheese, where yes, technically, and I'm certain that like there are arguments to be made, but can you though? Like, is it really the one that you want to be? Okay, this analogy really kind of started falling apart at the seams. I'll think of something better and more clever and probably sub it in right about now. Could you use an 18-inch barrel in close quarters? Yes, kind of in the same way that you can use a zucchini as a dildo. You can, you probably shouldn't, and there's better options out there. Hashtag bad dragon. And that kind of brings us into our cons. 18-inch barrels are heavy and long and unwieldy in close quarters, as the beginning of the video showed you. And now we're finally talking about muskets, aka 20-inch barrels. Now, what are 20-inch barrels good for? Honestly, in today's day and age, 20-inch barrels are basically mainly used for kind of clone builds and just for a vibe. I love 20-inch barrels for the vibe. I cut my teeth on the M16A2, so I have a soft spot in my heart for that rifle. And even then, I'm still saying that there's not much of a reason for a 20-inch barrel. However, getting into the pros of the 20-inch barrel, you get incredible velocity out of a 20-inch barrel. So out of a 20-inch barrel, again, your standard 55 grain, you're getting up to like 3,240 feet per second, which is about 100 feet per second more than an 18-inch barrel. So they can definitely be good for, again, like precision rifles, special purpose rifles, and competition guns. However, most of the time when I'm seeing 20-inch barrels floating around, they're typically on, again, clone builds or just kind of something that's built for a vibe. And that kind of gets us into the cons of the 20-inch barrel. Now, you can definitely use a 20-inch barrel in close quarters. I know I've trained with 20-inch barrels in close quarters before, and I mean, it's a pain in the ass, but you can still do it. Hashtag bad dragon. However, they're just not optimal for close quarters. Again, to kind of demonstrate that, I'm going to go ahead and clear this doorway. So again, kind of taking the pie, little by little, coming around, stopping here. You can see my muzzle is basically tapping that door jamb, which means that I'm going to have to really short stock this thing in order to attack that corner. So I really got to bring that rifle up over my shoulder, enter that room, and attack that corner. All right, and that's basically it for kind of a introduction to barrel length and the effect that it will have on your firearm. I hope that this video kind of helps you choose your barrel length, because like I said, it really is the heart and soul of your firearm. The barrel length really kind of drives what the job of that firearm is. And once you have what job you want that firearm to do, that'll kind of steer you in the direction of which barrel length you should go with. Now, there are many more barrel lengths that I did not cover in this video. I just kind of wanted to get the most common ones talked about because, well, yes, there's longer barrels than 20 inch. I've seen 22-inch barrels, 24-inch barrels, so on and so forth, but that's not something that your average person is really interested in putting on their rifle, because typically the only people that are doing stuff like that are like competition shooters. Now, one thing I just kind of want to add to the end of this video, just kind of send y'all off on, it's important to not get super into the weeds when it comes to optimizing your firearm. Now, what I mean by that is ultimately what matters more than having the mostest, coolest, most optimal build for your job set is to actually train with that firearm. Actually get out, put some rounds down range, take some courses, learn about room clearing, learn about tactics. Hell, get out to the airsoft field, like build a clone of your firearm as an airsoft gun and take it out to an airsoft field and just have fun slinging BBs at people. Why? Because while it may not be like true like simulation, like using sim rounds and stuff like that, it still gets you the experience of moving, shooting, and communicating with an actual group of people. Plus, it's just a lot of fun. I think that right now it's kind of really important to have fun. The state of the world right now and everything that's kind of going on, I think that what a lot of people need to start doing, they need to get off their devices, finish this video. I saw you. Get off their devices, unplug, and just go out and do something fun. Anyways, I'll go ahead and get off my soapbox now. I just hope that y'all have a wonderful day, wonderful week, wonderful month, and just be kind to one another. Dismissed.